Hello everyone, my name is Alejandro, owner of Tutoring by Alejandro, and welcome back to another video where I will teach you how to isolate a variable and express it in terms of the others. Okay, so the last video was just a quick intro. Today we're going to be tackling 6 exercises, each one with a little twist to it, to get you guys some good practice for the upcoming SAT math exam. Okay. So let's start. So we have if x minus 1 over 3 is equal to k and k equals 3, what is the value of x? Okay, so if you recall the previous video, there are 2 big tips. The first is start getting rid of whatever is farthest away from the variable you're trying to isolate. Okay, so on the left side, we have the -1 and we have the 3, okay? So the -1 is right up there with the x. So it's closer to the x than the 3, okay? That means we should start by trying to get rid of the 3, okay? Great. Now we identify what operation is the 3 performing on that side of the equation, okay? We can see that the 3 is dividing, right? Whenever you see a fraction, that is division, okay? And to get rid of something, what you do is you apply the opposite operation. So again, if you recall the previous video, we said that the opposite of addition is subtraction. And the opposite of multiplication is division, right? So since the 3 is dividing, we need to multiply by 3. Okay. Oh, and just so you know, I substituted k by its value of 3. Okay. Okay, so we need to multiply by 3, and we have to do it on both sides. Whatever you do on one side of the equation, you have to do it on the other. And you have to do it to every term. Okay. So I'm going to multiply by 3 on the left and multiply by 3 on the right. Okay, great. So on the left side, what do we have? We have a 3 here and a 3 here. If I wanted to, I could rewrite this as 3 over 3 times x minus 1, right? And that's equal to 3 times 3 equals 9. Great. So whenever you have a number divided by itself, except for 0, right? That is going to be equal to 1, okay? And that essentially removes the influence of the 3 on that side of the equation. Or in layman's terms, you're getting rid of the 3, okay? So I'm left with x minus 1 equals 9, okay? I can get rid of the parentheses because I only have a 1 there, right? And any number that multiplied by 1 is just the same number, right? So I don't need the parentheses. Okay, so now I just have to get rid of the -1. So the -1 is subtracting, right? Because it's negative. So applying the opposite means I have to add 1 on both sides, okay? So I'm left with x minus 1 plus 1. And -1 plus 1 is equal to 0, right? Okay. That means I got rid of the -1 and I'm left with x. And on the right side, I have 9 plus 1 equals 10. Okay, that means that our answer in this case is D. Okay. All right. Perfect. Good start. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so now we have 14x divided by 7y equals 2 times the square root of w plus 19. And they're asking, which equation correctly expresses w in terms of x and y? Okay, so we need to isolate the w. And there are a few things that are obstacles. We have a 2 here. We have a 19 here. And we also have a square root here, okay? And if you remember the tip from the previous exercise, we're going to start with whatever's farthest away from the w. right? In this case, it's the 2. Great, we're going to start with getting rid of the 2. Now, we have to identify what operations the 2 performing. So the 2 is multiplying, because whenever you see a number next to a square root, doesn't matter what's inside, this is a multiplication. Just like whenever you see a number next to a parentheses, right? That's also multiplication. If you see a number just next to a variable, even without the parentheses, that's also multiplication, okay? So the 2 is multiplying, and we're going to apply the opposite, okay? So let me just quickly write this down. Okay, we're going to apply the opposite, which means I have to divide by 2 on both sides. And I have to do it to the entire term, right? Okay, I have to divide by 2, divide the whole left by 2. Okay, and dividing by 2, just as a tip, is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. Okay, so on the right side, I have 2 divided by 2, so I can get rid of those, right? Because 2 divided by 2 is just equal to 1. And on the left side, we have what is essentially a multiplication between fractions, okay? And to do that, you just multiply the numerators, which is 1 times 14x. Any number multiplied by 1 is just the same as you had before, 14x, divided by, now I do 2 times 7y, okay? Right? So I'm going to multiply the numbers, which means I do 2 times 7, which is 14, and then I write down the y, okay? That's equal to the square root of w plus 19. Okay, on the left side, I have a 14 in the numerator and a 14 in the denominator, which means, since it's a fraction, that means they're dividing, right? I have 14 divided by 14. That's going to be equal to 1. So that means I can get rid of that. And I'm left with x divided by y equals the square root of w plus 19. Okay, now I have 2 more obstacles. I have the square root and I have the 19. So the 19 is right there with the w inside the square root. So that means I should start by getting rid of the square root. Okay, so recall the opposite operations, right? We have the opposite of addition is subtraction. The opposite of multiplication is division, right? Which you can also express as a fraction. And the opposite of a square root is squaring, okay? That means in order to get rid of that square root, I have to square both sides. So I'll do just that. I'm going to include this parentheses, right, to make it less messy. Okay, and I'm squaring both sides. So that means the square root can cancel out with that squared term, okay? Which means I'm left with w plus 19 on the right, and on the left, I'm left with x over y squared. Okay, we're almost there. We just have to get rid of the 19, which is much easier because we can clearly see that it's adding, right? You have plus 19. So I'm going to subtract 19 on both sides, which means plus 19 minus 19 is equal to 0, right? That's equal to 0, which means I'm left with w equals x over y squared minus 19. And that means that our answer in this case is C. Okay, so a bit trickier, especially since not everyone's aware of this here, that the opposite of the square root is squared. But this was a very useful exercise to keep in mind. Okay, all right, on to the next one. Okay, so we have 7m equals 2 times n plus p in parentheses, right? And they're asking which equation correctly gives m in terms of n and p. All right, This actually seems like an easier one because the only thing that I need to get rid of is the 7, all right? And if you recall correctly, if you see a number right next to a variable, that means they are multiplying, right? So I'm going to apply the opposite operation. Let me just rewrite this, which is division, and I'm going to apply it on both sides. Remember, to the entire expression, okay? So on the left side, I have 7 divided by 7, which is just equal to 1, right? So it means I can cancel that out. And I'm left with m equals 2 times n plus p, all of that over 7. And that means our answer is A. Okay? All right. This was much easier than the previous one. Great. All right, moving on. Okay. Now we have what is the value of b in terms of a, c, and d, given that negative 3ad minus bc equals 7. Okay, let's write that down. Okay, so we need to isolate b. So we have a few obstacles here, right? We have the c right here. We have this negative. And we have this term, this negative 3ad term, right? We'll start with whatever's farthest away. In this case, it's that negative 3ad. And what is that? What is it doing? It's subtracting, right? Because if I rewrite this as minus bc minus 3ad equals 7, you can clearly see it is subtracting, right? Applying the opposite means I have to add 3ad on both sides of the equation, right? 3ad. That means these two cancel out, and I am left with negative bc equals 7 plus 3ad. Okay? All right, great. All right, let's continue by getting rid of the c, right? So what is the c doing? So, as an extension of what I told you guys before, remember when I said if you have a number next to a variable, that's multiplication. If you have a variable next to a variable, that is also multiplication, which means what you have here is negative b multiplied by c, right? Negative b multiplied by c. So to get rid of the c, I have to apply the opposite operation, which means I am dividing by c on both sides, right? And remember, I have to do it to the entire expression. Okay, so that gets rid of the c on the left, and I'm left with minus b equals 7 plus 3ad divided by c. Okay? All right, so now I can get rid of the minus sign, which is an imaginary, well, not imaginary, an invisible negative 1. The way to do that is simply multiplying by negative 1 on both sides, right? Which means you're just moving the negative sign. But remember, you have to apply it to the entire expression. So I am multiplying by negative 1 here. And I am multiplying by negative 1 here. Just reorganizing this. Okay. I have a negative and a negative, right? That gets rid of that. So that I'm left with b on the left. And I can rewrite that negative 1 as just a minus sign, right? Applied to the entire expression. And the way I make it explicit that it's applied to the entire expression is I'm leaving it basically parallel to the division sign, right? Okay, great. So if I rearrange this, I can rewrite this as 3ad plus 7. Okay, That means that our answer in this case is E. Okay, perfect. Moving on. Okay, so now we have the square root of x squared plus 3 equals n, and x is a positive number. What is the value of x in terms of n? So we have to isolate the x, and there's a few obstacles, right? We have a square root, right? We have the plus 3 here, and we also have, which catches a lot of people off guard, we have the square term here, right? Because they're asking for the value of x in terms of n, not the value of x squared, okay? So we do have to get rid of that square term, right? And like we mentioned before, we have to start with whatever's farthest away. So in this case, you have, well, the square term is obviously very intimately attached to the x, so that's not the farthest thing. And you have the plus 3, which is right there with the x squared inside the square root. So that leaves the square root as being the farthest from the x. Okay, so we're going to start from there. Let me just rewrite this. Okay, so we mentioned that the opposite of square root is squaring, right? So we're going to apply a square to both sides. All right, and that'll get rid of this square root, right? Which will leave us with x squared plus 3 on the left, and just n squared, right? We don't really need the parentheses now. Okay, next up is the plus 3. So as you know, it's adding. We're going to do the opposite, which is subtracting. Going to subtract by 3 on both sides. Okay, you have plus 3 minus 3, that cancels out, right? Because that's equal to 0. And I'm left with x squared equals n squared minus 3. Okay, now we're left with the square term. So we said that the opposite of square root is squaring, which means if I want to get rid of a squared term, what I have to do is apply square root on both sides. Okay, so I'm applying square root here, and I'm applying square root here. Remember to do it to the entire expression. Okay, so now I can cancel out the square with the square root, and I'm left with x on the left equals square root of n squared minus 3. And that means that my answer here is E. Okay, all right, one more to go. Okay, guys, this is the last exercise. So we have if GH minus F is equal to G minus H, which of the following gives G in terms of the other variables? Okay, so this one's a bit different from the other ones because we do have a G term on the left and a G term on the right. Okay, so we have to essentially make sure that all the G's are on one side. It doesn't matter if it's the left or the right. I'm just going to choose moving all the G's to the left, okay? So the G on the right has an invisible plus sign, right? It's positive. So in order to get rid of it, I am going to apply the opposite operation, which means subtraction, right? I'm going to subtract by G on both sides, okay? So on the right, on the left side, I have G. Let's change color here. GH minus G minus F, okay, equals. Now, on the right side, I have plus G minus G, right? Positive G minus G. That cancels out because that's equal to 0. And I'm left with minus H. Okay, great. Now I will get rid of the F, right? It's the next farthest thing from the G's. So the F is negative, so I will add F on both sides. Okay. Negative F plus F is 0. That gets rid of that. And I'm left with GH minus G equals negative H plus F, which I can just rewrite as F minus H. Okay. It's the same thing. Okay, good. Now, I'm sorry about what's coming next because it's a topic I haven't discussed yet, but we do have to apply what's called common factor, okay? And the way you apply common factor is you have to take a look at each term and see what's, like the name says, common between each one. In this case, there's a g in the first term and a g in the second term. So that's our common factor. We'll start by writing the common factor down, and we're going to open parentheses. Now, right here to the left, I'm going to perform some extra math. Now, what we have to do is we have to take each term and divide it by the common factor. So I'm going to start with GH divided by G, right? We have a G in the numerator and a G in the denominator. So those are going to cancel out because they're equal to 1, right? That leaves me with H, right? Great. Now we have, let's go for the second term. We have negative G divided by G, right? So if G over G, or G divided by G is 1, right? Negative G divided by G is just simply negative 1, okay? So I'm just going to write negative 1. That's equal to F minus H. Okay, great. All right, now I have G times, and inside the parentheses I have H minus 1. So the G is multiplying the entire H minus 1. Right? Whenever you see, remember, whenever you see a variable, well, I explained it as a number next to a parentheses, but it also applies to a variable next to a parentheses. This is also multiplication, right? So I'm going to apply the opposite, which is division. So I have to divide both sides by H minus 1. Okay? And that's going to cancel out the H minus 1s on the left. And that leaves me with G equals F minus H over H minus 1. And that means my answer is D. Okay? So great. We went through all of the exercises. I hope this helped. Thank you very much for supporting my channel. I'm trying to grow my tutoring business. If you need some private tutoring before your SAT math exam, please do check out my website, tutoringbyalejandro.net. I'll be trying to make more YouTube videos this week, trying to prepare you guys for the exam. I also have an Instagram that goes by the same name, Tutoring by Alejandro. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much.